behind the scenes, it was a small group of people that were doing everything.
Welcome back to the GTM podcast. It's your host, Scott Barker.
I want to know how this insane growth actually happened.
Hello and welcome back to the GTM pod. As always, thank you for lending us your eardrums for the next 40 minutes or so. Our promise to you is we're going to make this as actionable as possible and speak through stories as much as we can. And this won't drop on a holiday, but we're actually recording this on a holiday, on Memorial Day. And that's very true to character of my next guest, one of the hardest working men out there, a dear friend of mine. I am joined by Scott Leese. Scott, what's up, man?
How's it going, man? Good to see you again.
Likewise. Thanks for jumping on and doing something, productive during a holiday. What's the plan after this? You got any fun things for Memorial Day going on?
Gonna be time to hit the pool, hit the barbecue. Little relaxing afternoon. That type of normal American holiday stuff.
I love it. I'm jealous. We had our long weekend here in Canada last weekend, but I did get to see some of my family this weekend. It was nice. But just for the listeners, if you don't know Scott Leese, you've probably never been on LinkedIn, so you should probably create a LinkedIn account. But he is a 6X sales leader, 4X founder, 3X author. He's a sales consultant. He does a lot of advisory work for great tech companies. A solopreneur who talks a lot about kind of diversifying your income through multiple different channels, and a community builder as well. You've done such a great job with Surf and Sales and, everything that you're doing. It's been cool to watch. But what did I miss there? Can you provide a little more color for the audience?
Well, you missed 20 years of blood, sweat, and tears, and some wins, a lot of shanks and failures and stresses along the way. But no, you pretty much covered what I've been up to.
And by the looks of it in your background, a pretty serious Casamigos addiction along the way, or what?
Oh, you got the bottle wrong, Scott. It's Es Clase Azul.
You're right. You're right. Oh man, shit. We'll have to edit that out. Now
I'm collecting them.
A tequila dork over here.
Yeah, that's right. That should be how you introduce me, actually. Scott, the tequila dork. Yeah.
I love it. All right, man. Well, I'm excited. I know you have a million stories. I've been lucky to hear some of them in person. We've been in Costa Rica together at your Surf and Sales conference and got to share our own war stories. And I know you have a ton, so I'm excited to get to a few of them. But before we get there, I always love riffing with our guests for a little bit. And I think a lot of people that listen to this podcast are trying to figure out what advisory roles mean and maybe how to get their first one. I know it's a super common question that I get asked by people who, they're maybe 8-10 years into their career. They've had a good, successful career, and they're trying to see, what that next step is. And a lot of people look at LinkedIn and they see people with these advisory roles like, what is this all about? I would love for you to just give a quick background on how that started for you, that journey, and maybe what companies should look for in advisors, and then flipped, what should advisors look for in companies and how to structure it?
Well, I think it's first important to define what advisor means. And this is part of the challenge, is that I think it means something different to everybody, because there's advisors who are really just names on a piece of paper who don't really do anything at all. And it's sort of like, it'll make us look, more respectable or whatever if I've got Scott Barker's name listed, but we don't really need much from him, right? And then there's advisors who your name is on the piece of paper on the website, and maybe you reach out if you're the founder, periodically, sort of like ad hoc. I'm going to reach out to you when I need you, Barker, and give me some advice, help me open up this account, or connect with this person, or hey, if you know anybody who's looking for X role, we're hiring. So I call those kind of like a real light touch kind of advisor. All right. Then there's the confusing bit, which people nowadays use the phrase advisor when really they're just talking about an ambassador or an evangelist or like an influencer. And you see a lot of these kind of like advisor pod strategies nowadays where there's like 10 to 15 advisors who get dumped into a Slack channel. And it's sort of like, hey, every time somebody in our company, post something, please go engage with it, share these articles, vote us up on Product Hunt, all this kind of stuff. That's really just like ambassador evangelism kind of stuff. I don't consider that an advisory role, but some people do. And then there's what I would consider an advisory role, which is really, I'm working with you for an extended period of time. I'd call it at least 3 months, usually 6 months or more, where we're really doing a lot of work together. We're meeting every single week. We're working on our strategy, go-to-market strategy, go-to-network strategy, messaging, a robust sales playbook that might have 50, 60 different documents in it. We're working on sales operations strategies and process. I might be helping you with recruiting challenges that you have. I might be doing some coaching and training, for team members that you've got. So that's a lot more involved, right? And unfortunately, there's no real way to tell based on the title what type of advisor somebody is. I have a few of each of those, right? But the last one that I talked about, the kind of real in-depth one, those are the ones that to me matter the most. Those are the ones that are most impactful for a company. And frankly, for the advisor, they're the most rewarding as well because you're putting a lot more time in, you're getting paid well, right? So that's a big distinction there. And there's also you could go a lot of different ways in terms of cash versus equity versus really nothing, just your name on the on the paper or whatever. So that's the best way that I can kind of break it down in terms of what they are, right? Now you wanted to know what to look for, right? So if you're an advisor or you're looking to get started being an advisor, I think you're looking for, number one, a product or an industry that you have some familiarity with and expertise in. Like, I'm not going to sign up to be Barker's technology advisor because I don't know anything about engineering. I'm not going to sign up to be a marketing advisor because I'm not a marketing specialist, but I know sales. And so if you come to me and you need help with sales stuff, okay, so we're aligned, right there. But then I think we need to ask and find out what stage somebody's at. I'm not going to go be an advisor to a publicly traded company with 10,000 sales reps. I've never done that kind of thing before as an operator. So I don't feel qualified necessarily to go do it as an advisor. So I'm looking for sort of stage alignment. And then I'm looking for, do I actually believe in this company and this product, both from a possibility of success standpoint and, a value alignment standpoint, right? If I'm somebody that, believes strongly in progressive issues and maybe like taking care of the planet, that type of thing, I'm probably not going to be an advisor to an oil and gas company because I don't have value alignment there, right? And if a company has got lots of negative press or they haven't been able to make any sales and they're 6 months away from fume date, that might not be a good pick for me because they might be going away and that doesn't look very good on my resume, right? From a company standpoint, very similar stuff. You're looking for somebody who's been at your stage before, who's done what you're, hoping to get done before, somebody who's got a pretty decent reputation, somebody who's willing to get in and kind of do some heavy lifting, probably, assuming that's what you need. And I think somebody who's really communicative and accessible. One of the worst things you could have in an advisor is somebody you can never get a hold of, or one of those friends or family members that we all have who takes 5 days to text you back. Like, that's not what you're looking for, I don't think, from an advisor. You're looking for somebody where you can put up the bat signal and bang, you're getting a response, as fast as possible. So hopefully I answered those three kind of questions the way you were looking for.
No, that's super helpful. And I love the framework of looking at your advisory boards through like three different lenses. There's like the people that will give you clout or make your company seem more like legit and respected. Third is this like light touch strategic bucket. And then third is more like an ambassador influence, can help you with distribution. And then you've kind of layered on this fourth one, which is super hands-on. You're diving in, you're almost doing, projects together. There might be deliverables of like a playbook or something like that. And they're super hands-on. And I love your advice for like getting started, niche down, know exactly what lane you play in, what you're good at. For you, it's sales. It could be community. It could be demand gen, whatever it is. Make sure the world knows that. Make sure you're aligned with stage, and then make sure that you're aligned with this company and product's vision, right? I always say, if you wouldn't invest your own cash into this company, you should not invest your time, right? It's the same thing. So make sure that you would write an angel check into that company. One thing I was going to ask you, again, just trying to think through the listeners who are trying to set this up for themselves, looking at the advisory roles you have, how many of them approached you versus you approaching them?
That's a really interesting question, and one that's never been asked of me before. I approached none of them, if you can believe that. Every single one of them found me one way or the other, whether it's through colleagues of mine, through referrals from, former CEOs or founders I worked with, or people from VC firms that funded some of the companies, or through my LinkedIn network, what have you. I have done no prospecting ever for landing these type of roles. So when I get asked this question or message sometimes behind the scenes, like, hey, how did you go about getting all these advisory roles? My answer is like, well, I fucking worked my ass off for 20 plus years as a sales leader, building and scaling sales teams and growing my network, and then expanding, my repertoire, and starting, a couple different companies and doing community building and all this kind of thing. And, people find me because of some of this stuff that I've done. It's never me messaging Scott and Max and Paul and saying, hey guys, you looking for, an advisor or anything like that? And I don't know. I mean, I guess for me, that's not the right approach to cold call or a cold prospect to try to get an advisory role. It's different to me. I don't proactively go out there and try to say, hey, how can I support your company? And I'm looking for this specific type of role for a lot of different reasons. A lot of those lower touch kind of advisor roles, there's really no compensation behind it, or there's some equity, and it's not a lot of equity, right? But if you're somebody that needs cash and an income, prospecting to get advisory roles that give you equity only is not really putting food on your table, right? And it's a common misconception. I talk to a lot of people that, have been a VP of sales once or twice, and they ask me that question. These people think I'm getting paid like, millions of dollars by all these companies. It's like, that is not how it works, not at all. I've had a couple exits from advisory roles, and it's like 25 grand, 35 grand. I think one of them I got like 50 grand, which was like a huge win for me in my mind. But you're not retiring off of that kind of, advisory gig. So
Yeah. No, a lot of great points there. It's like a get rich slowly game. So if you need cash in the bank, it's not the way. And that's interesting. So I will share with the audience as well. All of my advisory roles have also approached me. So I think if you're trying to get your first advisory roles, I think your time is better spent, building up your brand, building community, creating beacons that show your expertise, and then these interesting people and interesting problems will find you over time. I actually did have one come, and most of mine, I would love to know you, actually came from them approaching me to do some like consulting work. I used to do more consulting work. I don't anymore because the fund is crazy. But and then it would just naturally transition when it seemed like there was like a really long-term fit. It was just like, hey, don't pay me, monthly or hourly anymore. Let's just get a good stake of equity, and then I'm in it for the long haul. And then we kind of made a transition from consulting to advising, which would be some advice I think I would give folks too, is like maybe you start with some consulting and then move to advising over time. There was one company I was doing some work with that I actually approached and it didn't actually, we didn't end up making it happen. Because I think just power dynamics are off in that scenario. As soon as it's your idea and not theirs, changes the power dynamics. But is that a similar motion that has happened to you? Do you like consult or do a project?
Yeah, I usually start off, if I'm doing anything heavy lifting, like it's a consulting gig, but it's kind of like a known and discussed about thing that I'm going to continue to support them for the long haul. And so I end up just using the name advisory gig rather than saying like consulting project or something like that. Right. So it's just like, I'm working with Scott's company. I'm an advisor. I'm going to be here working in depth for like 6 months, almost doing like a lot of fractional kind of CRO type work. But I'm going to continue to support them when that's done, whatever that looks like, right? Help with deal flow and introductions. Suddenly you need an introduction to a VP of marketing and they don't know where to go. I can help out there, whatever it is. Sometimes introducing people to funds, right? I've brought a few potential, deals your guys' way just in case, that type of stuff. So for me, it doesn't start off as like just an advisory role without a lot of engagement and then progress to a consulting gig. It's usually like consulting gig that the work gets done and then becomes a lighter touch advisory gig.
That makes sense. And we could probably spend way too much time dissecting this from different angles, but I think that was super helpful. Let's transition now. I would love to kind of give you the mic to tell us just one super impactful story from this long career that you've had, and ideally one that maybe haven't widely shared with folks yet.
Well, I've talked a couple times about the one blip on my resume, at least as I see it, the one blip. But I don't talk about it a ton. It's not always a blast to talk about things that you screwed up, but it is important to talk about. I had been a head of sales twice and had, I don't know, 5 years or so of total experience under my belt. And I had taken 2 startups from basically like idea to, around 20 million in ARR in like 2.5 years. Okay. So I was drinking my own Kool-Aid at this point in time. And I kind of thought like, well, I don't really care about the product or anything else. Like I can figure out how to sell it and I can probably turn water into wine. Right. And so where can I go that's going to respect me and like pay me the most? So I had a friend that I had worked with previously who got this new marketing gig. And he, said, "Hey, we're looking for somebody to lead up sales. You should come work over here." I got to be honest with you, man. I did like no real research on the founders, no real research on the product and its kind of go-to-market readiness, no real research on the current sales people who were there or anything like that. All I cared about was this like ego-driven thing of, what can I get my salary to be? Can I get a bigger OTE? Can I get more equity? All this kind of stuff. And I got those things. I moved from one side of the Bay Area to another. So stupid. Uprooted my whole, life without doing research. And I got there and I'm not kidding. Within a couple weeks, I was like, I'm in big trouble. I knew right away. I was just like, these people move at a different speed, much slower than me. They have a much different sense of urgency, meaning they had none. The product, which I thought was ready to go, they couldn't decide exactly which direction they wanted to take it. So there wasn't even alignment in terms of what the tool did, let alone what's our ICP and who we could bring it to. The founder wasn't, I didn't have alignment with the founder. The founder was somebody who had had a few exits before and was kind of at the back nine of their career and sort of was like, I got this idea. We'll see how it goes. And I was at the front nine of my career going like, hey, I'm trying to, get paid here. Right. And so I would take like $1 million win. Whereas this guy was like, I got to take a big, big swing or it's not even interesting to me. So the whole thing was just a shit show right from the start. I think I only lasted about 7, 8 months. And then I was out. And what that did to me was it made me pause and say, okay, you can't just be successful no matter what. Like your arrogance about this and your lack of digging in and vetting opportunity can never happen again. And so I went about things a lot different the last 3 times I ended up being an operator. I took it very serious. I talked to lots of people. I had people sell the product. So I got people hired at these other companies before I even took the job to see if these reps could come back and report to me, hey, Scott, is this a sellable product? Do you think if I went there, we could figure this out? So I went about it, much, much differently. And the last 3 times, were nice, successful runs. But that's a big, big blip on my resume. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like ego got a hold of you a little bit. And I think it's not uncommon for, once you've done it a handful of times, like I've got my process. And I think it's so common for multiple time VPs of sales to just create a playbook and think it's going to work anywhere, and that can be the kiss of death. Timing, research, picking a company has so much to do with, your success and being able to actually have those big wins. So other than not doing the research up front, which was like a miss, what else did you do wrong in that situation? Do you think there was a world where you could have come in and tried to get more alignment, or what else kind of went wrong in that scenario?
Well, I actually don't know. I don't know that this was a salvable situation. But in terms of what else went wrong, I got distracted is one thing. I sort of decided after a few weeks, I don't really have much of a chance here. So this was actually the first time I started dabbling and doing stuff on my own and starting to think about some things and not giving something my full attention because I sort of felt like this thing doesn't deserve my full attention, right? Oh, that's not going to end very well, no matter where you are or where you go. I think on top of that, I sort of blindly believed the hype from one of my friends. It's like, oh, if Scott's working there, it must be good, right? Because Scott's not going to make a bad decision like this. And the reality is, everyone's capable of making a bad decision. No matter how many times you've done it, and one person's good decision could still be my bad decision, right? So I listened to a friend's word and just kind of blindly brushed it aside. I also think that at that point in time in my life, I did not have required empathy and understanding for different types of salespeople at different stages of their life and career. There was this like an amalgamation of, there was a big enterprise rep there. There was a more SMB rep. There was more of like a channel kind of rep they had this team that I had inherited, and there was no congruency between any of them. And I didn't know how to put all these kind of utility players together to form a cohesive unit at that point in time. And I remember trying to figure out like which one of these people can I actually work with and trust, because the other ones I think I just need to like get rid of, right? So that's another, mistake, is just thinking I need everybody to be this one type, I think, versus, okay, I've got 4 people with very different skill sets. Like, what can I construct to maximize, what we're going to be able to get out of this?
And have you since found strategies that help you with those like 4 sales archetypes? Do you have separate kind of managerial styles for each one?
Yeah, I mean, you you learn to relinquish some element of control. That's number one, rather than trying to stay completely abreast of every single move. Then there's just better sort of segmentation of who's going after what account, right? Rather than let's start everybody at the top or let's start everybody at the bottom. It's like, okay, we could try this. Um, I ended up figuring out how to run a few different channels. In my fourth gig. We were doing some outbound sales, we were doing inbound sales, we were doing outside sales like boots on the street. My 6th gig as an operator, I built an entire partner selling and channel kind of ecosystem. This is just stuff that I was not capable of at the time with, 5 total years of experience. I just hadn't been exposed, to enough. I didn't have a good enough network to give me ideas and advice and lean on for support. And there's just a level of maturity as well, you know, just as a human being and also as a business professional. There's a big difference between somebody with 5 years of business experience and almost 20 years of business experience. And there's often a different type of man or woman that you're talking to who's 30 years old versus somebody who's 45, right? And there's no real, for me at least, there was no real way to like skip ahead. Like I had to go through all those kind of processes. Right? I still consider it like by far the biggest fuck up that I had. But I also think that, I was able to learn from it and not repeat those mistakes. And I'm not sure that I would have been as successful in these other roles had I not had that big screw up.
Absolutely. We certainly learn more from our mistakes than our wins. And I appreciate you sharing a mistake versus a win, which is often the case when we talk through stories on this pod. Um, all right, flipped on its head. What did you do right? Because from the outside looking in, you said you were distracted and you started, thinking about other ways of potentially supporting yourself and your family. So looked in another light, that could be something you did right at that time period, at least for yourself personally. And then you did make a very successful bounce back. Sometimes people have these failures and it takes them a long time to get their confidence back, get their swagger back. So looking back at that particular time period, what do you think you did right?
Well, I have a very short memory. And I think that comes, as you know, because I know you were an athlete as well, but from being an athlete in particular, I played individual sport and a team sport. My individual sport was tennis. If anybody who's listening knows anything about tennis, I think it's the most frustrating sport known to man other than maybe golf. And you are missing things all the time, making mistakes that you should never make. You're losing points in games and you have to bounce back and not lose control of your emotions and what you have to have this kind of next play mentality. Like you shank that one, who cares? It's over. You got to move forward. So I didn't really suffer a big loss of confidence. It was more like a small dose of humble pie that I then internalized to mean, well, now I really know what I'm doing. Because now I've been exposed to things that my weaknesses and things that I'm not good at. So I tightened those up. So I didn't have this like confidence, dip. Like I was saying, what else that I did right is I vetted the mess out of the fourth opportunity before I took it. I ended up relocating from San Francisco to Austin. This is in 2011, so sort of the second half of my career.
You couldn't have timed that better, by the way.
Yeah, I know, right?
For a lot of different
Yeah.
reasons.
I was a little bit ahead of the curve, not completely, but a little bit ahead of the curve. So from a personal standpoint, like I took a lot of pressure off myself, going from commuting 70 miles a day each direction in the Bay Area, and trying to, make it work on one income family and the cost of living there. I like got rid of the commute almost entirely, changed the cost of living big time, went to a smaller city where there was easier sort of way to become known and make a name for yourself and your company. So recruiting became a little bit easier. I didn't have to compete with as many people and things like that. So all of those things combined just, I think set me up for a little bit of success. And, I said before I started to get distracted and started having entrepreneurial thoughts and things like that. Ultimately, that proved to be a good thing. But at the time, it was a bad thing because, I'm a big proponent of like, you can't go do this other thing until you've really figured out the first thing. And I started to try to do that, and I hadn't figured out the first thing, and it just compounded the failure. And I didn't really go back and try to start some other things until I was in a real solid groove. I'm like, I got this now, right? So it was I didn't start surfing sales until I was at 2017. So it was like 6 more years of being a VP of sales before I really looked at all at entrepreneurial stuff or side hustle stuff, what have you, right? So there was a big gap there where I was like, I need to put my head down and really make sure I know what the hell I'm doing as a VP of sales and as an entrepreneur and a business owner. So when I do go do this, I get it right.
Yeah, what I'm hearing there is like, you got to earn the right to side hustle. If you're going to go and start a side hustle, you better have fucking earned it in blood, sweat, and tears, and often years of experience, or it just is a distraction.
And it becomes a non-sustainable one. This is something that I think people don't think about when they are sort of saying to themselves, like, I'm tired of working for somebody else. Like, I'm going to go do my own thing. Respectfully, I think a lot of people can have a nice pop for like a month or two when they first go out on their own, whether it's the newness factor or the curiosity or whatever. But how do you survive when you're in month 5, 6, 7, 8? How do you survive when you're in year 3 and the macroeconomic conditions are completely different?
And the innovation cycles are so fast. And if you've been out every month, you're out of the game, the innovation is kind of leaving you behind. So like, year 2, the stuff you're talking about, the advice you're giving could be stale if you don't have this breadth of experience to pull from.
Yeah, if you haven't done lots of different things, and if you don't have, what if you're on your own, but you have a really small client base and you're really only working with like 2 clients at a time, and great, you're making, $100,000 or whatever. You're only exposed to like 2 different products, 2 different selling motions and things like that. Whereas if you've got a client base of like 10, 15, 20 scattered across the country in different markets, different segments, it's like your skills are being sharpened and you're being kept aware of like what's around turn 3 rather than just looking at turn 1 on the racetrack, right? It's a big thing that people miss. I know a lot of people in the last year or so who left to go out on their own and they got off to real good starts, and now they're sort of like, I don't know if I'm going to be able to survive.
Earn the right to side hustle. I like that. I think that might be the title of the title. Boom. We did it. All right. Last question. I'm gonna make this one a little more broad, so you don't have to just pull from this time period that we've been talking about. But looking back on your entire career to date, what would you do differently?
I would have probably tried to leave San Francisco sooner for some I'm just not like a big city person. I grew up in a small town in Chico, California. And I think going somewhere a little smaller was more anchoring for me, and just removing some stress would allowed me to sort of think more clearly, feel a little bit less pressure, and therefore perform a little better. The other thing is, I would have took a couple bigger swings. Here's what I mean by that. I think it takes just as much energy and effort to build and scale a company and a sales organization that has the possibility of being $1 billion company as it does doing the same thing with a company that really is going to max out around like 250 million, right? And I know now because I've done both. But I can remember thinking early on, you know what? If we just scale this company to like 15, 20 million or whatever, somebody will come around and offer us like 100 million bucks, maybe 200 million, and we'll get like a nice little single or maybe like a soft double in terms of my payout, right? And those gigs are fucking hard, man. It was exhausting. I was working insane hours, right? And I kind of knew like we're never really going to go beyond that. I could, my own mind is like, this is not $1 billion company. This is like a real solid, $100 million exit company. And then the last company that I was at, I sort of knew and felt right away like this is big. Like this could be a multi-billion-dollar kind of opportunity. It's just a bigger market. There's a lot more money at stake. And honestly, it was like a little bit easier, not to maybe because this was my last go and I'd already done it 5 times, whatever, but it certainly wasn't any harder. And so now sitting back on things, I'm like, you know what? I wonder if I went back and looked the 5 other companies that I said yes to. I wonder if I could have dug in deeper and tried to go to 5 other companies that had the potential for being billion-dollar companies rather than kind of playing small and thinking, let me just try to go to some companies that can have a 9-figure exit. So I think I would have took a couple bigger hacks, bigger swings.
I think that's great advice. Like time is going to go by anyway. You're going to, if you're hardwired the way I know you are, you're going to give it your all anyway. So you might as well be playing a game that the potential outcome of that game is, a 10, 100x versus, 3, 4x or whatever it is. That I think that's great. And would you say identifying that would be just going heavier on the research and understanding the category? How would you go about doing that if you were to go?
Well, I think it's a lot easier to do now than it was 20 years ago when I got started. I'll tell you that much. I mean, the first job I ever got, this was like where people were looking for jobs on Craigslist still, and there's not much information about the companies or the founders or anything like that. It's not like I think LinkedIn maybe just got started when I got my first sales job, right? So I was flying blind, and if you know my story, I didn't have a job until I was 27 years old anyways, because I had all these health problems and everything like that. So, and I didn't graduate with a business degree. I wasn't paying attention to startup life and tech life. I didn't know shit about any of this kind of thing. And I really didn't spend much time researching it, honestly, So there's, I think probably most people, if you look back at your life, you're like, fuck, I could have done this. I could have done that. I'm not like mad. I don't sit around and stew about it. But now when you ask me, I'm like, shit, I could have done this. I could have done that. Right. Yeah, but I would have dove in a lot deeper and tried to understand the differences. This is a maybe oversimplified difference, but like the difference between selling a service or like a widget versus selling like a platform that somebody cannot rip and replace. Like their entire workflow is dependent upon this thing. That's so much more of a must-have versus, some little Chrome plugin that, is worth like $4.99 a month or something like that. It's like, there's a big difference between those things.
Yeah. It's so funny, but I guess it's just experience. I remember not knowing those things. How do you no one teaches you those things at the beginning of your career. You just don't know, you know? I feel like this should be a class in colleges and universities. It's
It
like
should
how
be.
to
But
pick.
there are resources now that do teach you about this. I mean, God knows how many podcasts might talk about this kind of stuff, or webinars might talk about this, or live kind of events where they're talking about how do you pick which company you're going to go to, or even kind of startup incubator, programs and entrepreneur in residence type stuff where venture firms are like helping people figure out, maybe you want to start this kind of business or that kind of that shit, if it was happening somewhere, was nowhere near my purview.
You weren't invited. You
No,
weren't invited.
I did not have invitation to those parties when I was, that age, that time in my life.
Yeah, I feel like there's just no excuse this day and age. You can go on Crunchbase, you can go on Glassdoor, you can call VCs will shoot an email to the VCs that have invested in this company. They're incentivized to get good talent at these companies. They're going to give you a slightly biased answer, but if you ask the right questions, you'll get a lot of information from those folks. So definitely no excuse. All right, my friend, I want to go quickly to a listener question. I pulled one out that I think is kind of in your wheelhouse. The question is, what's your number one piece of advice for a brand new account executive? Someone just starting, doesn't say, but I'm assuming they maybe just got promoted from BDR, SDR. What's your number one piece of advice?
Well, I actually hate this question. I'm going to be honest with you.
And here's why we keep them anonymous most of the time.
Well, because it presumes that there's like one magic bullet, right? And it presumes that somebody can focus on just one thing and have that make a tremendous amount of difference. And my one thing could be the opposite of yours. And so, and I get asked this question a lot, and I don't remember ever asking myself or anybody around me this question at the time. I might say, how do you do this better? How did you get more people to pick up the phone? Was there a different time of day that's working for you, Scott? Have you had results on a Saturday from doing any work on a Saturday? I feel like I asked more specific questions than, Scott, what's one thing that I could do to be really good here today? Oh, I mean, maybe the answer is learn to ask better questions, especially if you have the opportunity to ask them from some people who've been there and done that and have a tremendous amount of experience. There's a difference between saying, let's say you go through a demo and you say to somebody, does everything make sense? Right? Any questions so far? Those are terrible questions, right? Any questions so far? Instead, say, okay, so we just looked at that. How would you use this over there? Which person at your company would be most impacted by this particular feature? And what do you think they would say? Something that's just a little bit deeper that gets people thinking a little bit more, that avoids the like, yeah, no, looks good kind of thing. So learn to ask bigger, better, deeper questions than surface level ones.
One of my favorite answers. Yeah, get specific language, detailed language, depth. There's a very important things to learn as you're learning to sell. Like the more detailed language you can use, it allows people to actually answer the question you're really trying to ask. So I thought that's a great answer. All right, I'm excited to ask you this one. So these final two questions I always keep the same. Excited to get your hot take on what is one thing, piece of advice, best practice that revenue leaders or founders widely believe to be true that you think is bullshit or at least no longer serving us?
Well, I actually think that my answer there is that the traditional go-to-market strategies will not work in another couple years. I think the phone and email and social works significantly less now than it did 5, 10, 15 years ago. And so I think go-to-market is going away, and it's going to be replaced with a go-to-network approach, which is customer-led growth, community-led growth, referral and partnership led selling. And I did a little video about this the other day, and there was a lot of strong opinions. Let's just say there's a lot of people building and working on things like this who were kind of saying, hey, Scott, thanks for speaking out and thinking about this. And, we agree, kind of ahead of the curve. And I had a lot of people who hammered me, and they're like, you trying to say that email doesn't work and the phone doesn't work, and, you're giving bad advice to people. People were pissed off about it. I don't think that those things don't work right now. I'm simply saying there's diminishing returns. I don't know that you can argue with me when I say that email doesn't work as good now as it did 5 years ago. I actually don't know how people can argue that. And I don't know how you can argue that about the phone either. So I think sometime in the next couple years, you're just simply not going to be able to go to market by cold calling people and cold emailing people the way that we've always done.
Could not agree more. And thanks for sharing that take. I mean, the writing's on the wall. I mean, it's pretty obvious, especially with the advancements in AI, right? Like everyone is going to be using AI to write their emails soon. But what a lot of people don't think about is on the flip side, I'm going to have AI reading all my emails and seeing what's relevant or not. And you're not even going to make it close to my inbox if you don't. Like, I'm basically going to teach an AI what I care about and what I'm working on. And that will adjust over time as my goals and things adjust. And it will only allow people that are working within the goals and challenges and problems I'm trying to solve to even come close to me. Right. And so it will be like, we think email filters are like tough to get through now. You just wait. It's going to get way, way more difficult. And the same thing will happen to your phone, right? Like we'll be able to understand where this call is coming from, if they're using a tool, all this stuff. And it will just you won't even make it. So it will be like, and this might be 5 years, who knows, but it's coming. So why not start hedging your bets? And I agree with this.
Yeah.
What did you call it?
I actually think it's coming sooner than we all believe, because the rate of innovation is just like speeding up, and that's, if it took 5 years for the last thing to die out, I don't think it takes 5 years for the next thing to die out, because the cycle is just way faster than it used to be. Think about the leap from creating sequences 15 years ago to AI generated video content, where you just type up a little script and there's a humanoid actor AI who's on camera on the website, like giving a demo.
Yeah.
I think it'll be here fast. I think it'll be here faster than most people think.
And you called it go to network. So I really like that
go to
term.
market will be replaced by go to network. I think that will become the new kind of phrase.
I like it. And then you think you use all these technology advancements through AI, but you can only use them if you have the trusted network that will actually react to those things. So I think I like it. All right. Final question, and then I'll let you go to the grill and ideally some tequila sodas. What's one tactic or strategy that revenue leaders can implement like today that you think will move the needle?
Create a referral channel, a partner channel. I mean, you can overthink the hell out of this and spend the next couple weeks trying to optimize everything, but you want to do something really, really simple that works? Just take 100 accounts that you're trying to break into, put them in an Excel file, couple categories, name a company, contact name, LinkedIn URL, maybe something like that. And just send the list to your advisors, your consultants, your VCs, an influencer that you're friends with, a community. And then ask those people, say, hey, who do you know here? Do you know anybody well enough to make an intro? Help them out. Write a tiny little script that just says, hey, Scott, my buddy Scott is trying to get a hold of you. I don't know if you have XYZ problem or not. If so, he'd love to have a meeting with you. If not, no worries. This is so underutilized and is this is a brain dead simple way to do it, but it's what I was talking about before in terms of like this partner selling and referral selling. You send 100 accounts like that to one person who's well connected, they're probably going to be able to open 2 or 3. You send it to a bunch, they're probably going to be able to open 10 or 20. And you go from having 0 pipeline from those 100 accounts to tons. I'll tell you a real quick story. So a couple weeks ago, it's about 2 months old now, I started a company called GTM United, right? It's a community-based company. We do trainings a couple times a week. We've got live sessions, you got channels and people networking and all this stuff. But I also have this referral program inside called GTM Assist. So I took one of my vendor partners that I work with. They sent me 50 accounts in the education sector, 50 universities that they're trying to break into and have been unable to do so. In 24 hours, we opened $980,000 of pipeline. 24 hours. That's it. So that's an easy thing. You don't have to over-engineer it at all. That's an easy thing you could do to open up more pipeline today.
Dead simple and incredible advice. Think if you could, by next week, have 10 to 20 new opportunities at your perfect ICP, which you should, your ACV at those should be super high. Imagine that, like literally next week. And it's so simple. We span this up at Outreach with great results. Do this. If you're not doing this, do this. If you're a CEO founder, do this. If you don't have time, get your best partner person, your best AE or your best PDR, someone to own it and just run this program. That's great advice.
And you know what? If you're a rep out there, I'll add this. If you're a rep out there and your company doesn't get it or is not willing to invest in this kind of thing, you can run the play yourself. You don't have to wait, right? Let's say there's God knows how many people in each of our networks that we're friends with. All those people, if they came to us and did that, I don't know about you, but I would certainly try to help. And you don't have to wait around for your boss's approval necessarily, right?
Yeah, agreed. Well, Scott, my man, it is always fun to chalk it up with you. You're the man. If people want to learn more about GTM United, get involved in surf and sales, best way to do that is through LinkedIn or?
Yeah, you can hit me up on LinkedIn for sure. GTMUnited.com is the website for the community. And surfandsales.com is the website for the Surf and Sales Summit. We hold those a couple times a year down in Costa Rica. That's the best place to get a hold of me.
I love it. And I can't speak highly enough of my experience at Surf and Sales. If you're a leader or an individual contributor and you want to actually connect with folks, I made literally lifelong friends that I still keep in touch with all the time from that trip, which was so cool. So do it. Convince your company to send you. But Scott, I appreciate you. Go enjoy your long weekend with your family. And for all those listeners, thank you so much for listening. But as I always say, listening is one thing, executing is everything. Go listen back, apply some of this, and make it happen. All right. Scott, till next time, my friend.
All right, bud. Talk soon.